The greatest defeat isn't death. It's a day lived without knowing why you're alive. Sun Tzu. I spent many years doing everything I was told would bring fulfillment. I followed the rules. I won battles, gained respect, made decisions with precision. But one morning, long after another so-called victory, I sat alone and felt nothing. No pride, no peace. Just silence. A silence that didn't comfort. It accused. I had everything, and yet I had nothing. The worst kind of emptiness isn't loud. It's the quiet, creeping kind. It's when you look at your life and realize you don't know why you're living it. You followed a map someone else drew, and it led you somewhere you don't want to be. I had mastered the art of war, but not the art of being alive. I had trained men, conquered territories, but I couldn't conquer the question gnawing at me from the inside: what is the point of all this? No one prepares you for that moment, when the applause fades, when there's no enemy to fight, no strategy to build, no next move, just you, and the terrifying silence of your own mind. I thought I was disciplined. I thought I was focused, but I was just distracted from the truth that I didn't know who I was beneath the armor. We are taught to avoid that silence, to fill it with goals, plans, victories. But the silence is where the real war begins. The war for meaning. You can win every external battle and still lose the internal one. That's where I was, surrounded by the spoils of war, yet dying inside. And here's the truth. No one told me. Meaning doesn't arrive. It doesn't knock on your door or emerge from some book or teacher. Meaning is forged, not found. It's carved out through pain, through brutal honesty, through standing still long enough to hear the voice inside you that you've silenced for years. At that moment, I stopped pretending. I stopped running. I let the emptiness speak. And it told me, you've lived by strategy, not by soul. That was my first awakening, and it hurt more than any wound I had taken in battle. If these words resonate with you, subscribe to the channel. Let others hear the truth they've been starving for. And join the Telegram. There, we go deeper. If you recognize yourself in what I just said, leave a comment. I no longer run from pain. They called me a prodigy of discipline, a strategist born to lead. From a young age, I absorbed the ways of order, honor, victory, but none of it was mine. I was shaped by the voices around me, teachers, commanders, family, expectations carved into my skin like ancient commands I was never allowed to question. I did not choose my direction. I inherited it. And the world praised me for walking it well. What they didn't see was the slow death beneath the surface. I wasn't living. I was performing. Every move, every decision, every so-called triumph was built on a silent hope that maybe, just maybe, one day I would feel real. But I didn't, because the path wasn't mine. There is a price you pay when you abandon your own voice. At first, it's subtle. You wake up slightly numb. You feel a strange disconnection from your victories, like they belong to someone else. Then it deepens. You start to lose the ability to know what you want. You wait for instructions. You crave validation like water. You tell yourself it's purpose, but it's just obedience dressed in honor. I was a master of war, but a stranger to my own desires. I knew how to defeat enemies, but not how to recognize myself. Every time I said yes to the life they planned for me, I was saying no to the life that was quietly dying inside me. I remember one battle. We had prepared for weeks, calculated every outcome. We won. The generals celebrated. But I stood there, surrounded by corpses, and felt a deep, unshakable question. Why am I here? Not on this field, on this earth. That question haunted me, not because I couldn't answer it, but because I realized I had never even asked. I had been too busy becoming who they needed me to be, and in the process, I abandoned the one thing that could have led me to meaning, my truth. The illusion is seductive. Do what's expected, and life will reward you. But life doesn't reward obedience. It rewards authenticity. And authenticity often looks like failure to those who worship the system. I failed in the eyes of those above me when I walked away. They called me ungrateful, weak. But for the first time, I wasn't failing myself. And that was the beginning of something real. If you're living a life that looks good but feels empty, stop. Ask yourself, who chose this for me? Whose dream am I trying to fulfill? The answers will hurt, but the hurt is a doorway. Walk through it, burn the false path, build your own. There was a day I won a battle so flawlessly, not a single man from my unit fell. Strategically, it was perfect. Every calculation, every movement, precise. I stood on the hill, looking down at what was once an enemy, now a silence of bodies. The army behind me cheered. I didn't. I felt nothing. Not pride, not relief, just the same coldness that had been growing inside me for years. I had been taught that victory was the ultimate measure of purpose. But what they never told me is that victory without meaning is just another form of death. You can pile up wins, medals, applause, but if you're not alive inside, you're just a ghost collecting trophies. That was the moment it truly hit me. Success means nothing if your soul isn't present for it. I had been chasing goals that weren't mine, and every time I reached one, it felt like a betrayal. Because deep down, I knew I wasn't chasing them for myself. I was chasing them for approval, for identity, for permission to exist. And when I got it, it was empty, like a feast made of ash. You can't feed your spirit with someone else's definition of achievement. I tried, I failed. Not publicly. Publicly, I was untouchable, but internally, I was falling apart, quietly, invisibly, tragically. There was a night when a soldier I mentored came to me after another so-called perfect campaign. He told me I had changed his life, that I was the reason he became the man he was. And all I could think was, then I've done you a disservice, because if you become what I've become, you'll wake up one day and realize you've built a kingdom around your emptiness. You'll call it discipline. Others will call it greatness. But you'll know the truth. It's a cage, a silent, golden cage. And it's not just war. Some of you listening now have climbed ladders, built careers, raised families, played every role you were told would bring purpose. But inside, you're tired, not physically, spiritually. You smile out of habit. You wake up not because you want to live, but because it's expected. That is the hidden crisis of our time. Not lack of achievement, but lack of aliveness. And no one talks about it because admitting it feels like defeat. But it's not defeat. It's the beginning of truth. Here's the practice. Stop glorifying the external. Sit with your victories. Ask yourself, not what did I win, but who did I become to get here? Did you lose yourself to gain an image? Did you abandon your truth for applause? If yes, you can still come back. Meaning begins where pretending ends. There's a kind of war no sword can win. A war that happens in the silence between your thoughts, in the mirror when no one else is watching. I spent years mastering the battlefield, reading movements, predicting strategies, bending chaos to my will. But none of that prepared me for the night I came face to face with the part of myself I had buried. The part I was ashamed of. The part I fought harder than any enemy. My shadow. The parts of me I called weak. The fears I mocked in others. The rage I suppressed beneath discipline. The jealousy I denied while praising others. It was all still there, waiting, watching, shaping every decision I made from the dark. No one tells you that the more you reject your shadow, the more it controls you. I used to think I was in command of my mind, my emotions, my purpose. But behind every act of control was fear. Behind every need to win was a deeper need to prove I mattered. I thought I was leading armies from strength, but I was running from the parts of myself I never dared to meet. And the longer I ran, the more those parts bled into everything. My leadership, my relationships, my silence. You don't outrun your shadow. You just make it more invisible, more manipulative, more dangerous. One night, alone in my tent after a difficult decision cost lives, I felt something collapse in me. It wasn't grief, it was honesty. The truth that I didn't feel guilt because I was numb. I had built my identity on being the unshakable one, the strong one. But that night, I realized I was just disconnected. I had armored myself so deeply that even my own feelings couldn't reach me. And that's when I understood. Strength without vulnerability is just self-imposed exile. You become your own prison guard. And the worst part is, you start to believe that this cage is you. I began to write. Not strategy, not records, just feelings, ugly ones, desperate ones. I wrote letters I never sent. I wrote truths I never said out loud. I wrote until the pages bled. That was the beginning of seeing my shadow, not as a threat, but as a teacher. Every flaw I tried to erase was a part of me that wanted to be understood. Every rage, every craving, every insecurity, none of it made me unworthy. It made me real. Here's the practice. Stop editing yourself. Write, speak, scream the things you think would make people leave you. And when you do, watch who stays, especially yourself. Your shadow holds your vitality. It holds the energy you've locked away. And if you can face it, not conquer it, not fix it, but face it, you'll find a kind of power no battlefield ever gave me. Not the power to defeat, but the power to be whole. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It whispers. It sits with you in the quiet moments, in the pauses between distractions, in the split second after the applause ends. I used to fear that silence because I knew what waited there. Not weakness, not failure, but truth. The truth that I was tired, not from battle, but from pretending. Tired of holding it all together. Tired of wearing strength like a mask. Tired of surviving instead of living. And when I finally stopped running, when I sat still long enough, that pain began to speak. It told me everything I refused to hear. That I wasn't okay. That I didn't know who I was anymore. That I had built my life to avoid myself. They train you to push through, to silence pain, to call it weakness, to label it a distraction. But what if pain isn't the enemy? What if it's the only part of you still honest? I had lost people. I had lost dreams. I had lost pieces of myself in every compromise. But I never grieved. I moved forward, always forward. Until one day, there was nowhere else to go but down. And in that descent, I found something sacred. Stillness. The kind of stillness that strips away your illusions, your titles, your armor. The kind of stillness that doesn't offer comfort, but clarity. There was a moment when I sat alone after losing a friend. No war, no strategy, just death. And I realized I didn't know how to feel. Not because I didn't care, but because I had numbed myself so deeply that even sorrow couldn't reach me. That's when I understood. Pain is not the problem. Disconnection is. When you disconnect from pain, you disconnect from life. And without life, there can be no meaning, there can be no truth, there can be no you. So I let it in. I let the grief break me. I let the fear speak. I let the tears fall without turning them into metaphors. I stopped analyzing. I just felt. And in that rawness, something shifted. The pain didn't disappear. It transformed. It became a compass, a reminder, a teacher. It showed me where I had abandoned myself, where I had betrayed my values, where I still needed to return. And in that return, I found fragments of who I really was. Not the version people praised, but the man underneath. Here's the practice. Don't run. When pain comes, stop everything. Sit with it. Name it. Let it speak. Ask what it's trying to protect, what it wants you to remember. Pain isn't here to punish you, it's here to wake you. It's the part of you that still believes you're worth saving. And if you're brave enough to listen, it will lead you not away from life, but back into it. I spent most of my life chasing something I couldn't name. Glory, perhaps. Purpose. A legacy that would outlive me. They all sounded noble enough to justify the sacrifice. But deep down, I was just trying to feel real, to feel like I mattered. I believed meaning was a destination, a treasure you find once you've proven yourself worthy. But the more I sought it, the further it drifted. I thought the next victory would give it to me, then the next, then the next. Until one day, I stopped chasing, not because I had found it, but because I was too exhausted to keep going. And in that stillness, without effort or intention, I began to feel something different. Not the fire of achievement, but the quiet presence of being. It didn't shout, it didn't sparkle, but it felt true. And for the first time, I didn't need anything more. It happened on a day I hadn't planned for. I was walking with a young soldier, barely more than a boy. He asked me what the purpose of all this was. The war, the discipline, the control. I expected to give him a rehearsed answer, something about honor, protection, order, but I couldn't speak, because in that moment, I realized I no longer believed the words I had built my life on. So I told him the truth. I said I didn't know, that I used to think I did, but the older I got, the less certain I became. And then I said something I hadn't even said to myself before. Maybe the purpose isn't something we find. Maybe it's something we live into, one honest moment at a time. He was silent, but he didn't look away. He didn't want certainty, he wanted honesty, and I gave it. That moment stayed with me, not because I said something wise, but because I didn't pretend, I didn't perform. I was simply there, stripped of answers, open in my uncertainty. And in that space, I felt more alive than I had in years. That's when I understood. Meaning doesn't come when you're ready. It comes when you're real. When you stop reaching for it like a prize and start noticing where it already lives, in the pauses, in the integrity of your choices, in the quiet courage of telling the truth. I had spent so long being someone others could follow that I forgot how to follow myself. I ignored my instincts. I dismissed my feelings. I made decisions based on what was logical, strategic, acceptable. But meaning doesn't live in logic. It lives in alignment. In that subtle knowing that you're not betraying yourself with each step. And you only find that knowing when you start asking the hardest question of all, is this mine, this goal, this relationship, this version of success, or is it a role I've been cast in and forgot I could walk off the stage? The truth is, the more I stripped away what wasn't me, the more clearly I could feel what was. And it was never loud, never dramatic. It was in how I breathed, how I listened, how I showed up when no one was watching. That's what gave me a sense of direction. Not because someone handed it to me, but because I stopped abandoning myself long enough to feel it rising from within. Here's the practice. Let go of the idea that meaning is something distant. It's not in the next book, or teacher, or breakthrough. It's already here, buried under the noise. Start noticing where you feel most honest. Start choosing the thing that feels alive, even if it makes no sense to others. Trust the quiet moments. They often carry more truth than a lifetime of striving. Meaning isn't what you find. It's what remains when you stop lying to yourself. There was one moment in my life that shattered everything I thought I understood about purpose. It wasn't on the battlefield. It wasn't in the aftermath of victory or defeat. It happened during what should have been an ordinary evening. I had been invited to speak to a group of young warriors, fresh recruits, hungry for knowledge, eager to be shaped into something worthy. I stood before them, ready to deliver wisdom. And then I saw him. A boy, maybe 15. His eyes didn't shine like the others. They were tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from training, but the kind that comes from life already breaking something inside you. After the gathering, he approached me. He didn't ask about war. He didn't want tactics or strategy. He asked, "What if I don't want to fight? What if I just want peace?" I looked at him, and for a moment, I wanted to give him the honorable answer, the noble justification. But I didn't. I told him the truth. I said, "Then listen to that voice, because that voice is still yours." He nodded, but before he left, he asked one more thing. "So what was it all for?" And I had no answer. That question followed me for years. It haunted me because I realized I had built my life on goals. Win this, prove that, become more, earn respect. But when I looked back, the victories didn't carry meaning. The meaning came in the moments in between. The late nights under a silent sky, the unexpected conversations, the times I chose compassion over pride, the day I didn't kill a man because I saw fear in his eyes that looked too much like mine. Those were the moments that stayed. Not the medals, not the titles, the small, raw pieces of presence. That boy's question forced me to stop chasing and start remembering. What if the meaning of life isn't something you win, but something you walk? That became my vow. I would stop measuring my life by what I achieved and start honoring it by how present I was on the path. I would stop asking what I was moving toward and start asking how I was moving through. That shift changed everything. I stopped fighting battles that weren't mine. I stopped proving things to people who never mattered. I started listening to the wind, to my breath, to my instinct. I let go of being legendary and became something rarer, real. And in that quiet choice, I found peace. That was the last time I ever taught in public. After that, I lived simply, not because I gave up, but because I woke up. I understood that I could spend a lifetime chasing something I already had. I just hadn't been still enough to feel it. Life isn't about arrival. There is no finish line that gives you the stamp of worthiness. Meaning is a direction, not a destination. It's how you carry yourself, how you treat others, how deeply you inhabit the moment you're in. The deeper I walked into that truth, the lighter I became. Here's what you can do. Stop asking what your life is supposed to be about. Start asking how you show up for the life that's already happening. Practice presence. Every morning, sit in silence for 5 minutes. Not to think, not to fix, just to feel. Notice your breath. Notice what hurts. Notice what you're avoiding. Write it down. 1 sentence a day. Today I was real when... That's it. Keep a record of your honesty. Over time, those moments will become your compass. And one day, you'll look back and realize you weren't wasting your life. You were building it, moment by honest moment. If these words speak to something buried in you, subscribe to this channel. Let the message reach those who are still chasing what can't be caught. Subscribe to the Telegram, where we go deeper than the surface into the silence most avoid. And if this video stirred something in you, write in the comments, "I accept my shadow." Let's see how many of us are ready to stop running. Share this with someone who's been asking the same questions in the dark. This is not the end. It's the beginning of a different kind of life. One where presence matters more than perfection. One where your path is your answer. And every step you take in truth is the meaning you were looking for all along.